Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. I'm your host, Rebecca, and I've been on vacation for the last 2 weeks and apparently for the rest of this week as well, because the trial that I'm going to cover, the next trial that I will be recapping for you guys, is the trial of the Rush case with Alec Baldwin. That starts on July 9th. So I'm going to be bringing you that. But first, while I was away, there have been several updates that I wanted to give you on 4 different cases. So the first case was the case of 19-year-old Dylan Rounds. Dylan was a young man who went missing from his farm in Utah over Memorial Day weekend in 2022. Well, his body was not found, and they ended up arresting a man named James Brenner on some firearms charges. He was squatting on the property of Dylan Rounds. So they arrested him on firearms charges because he's a convicted felon, not supposed to be in possession of a weapon. They arrested him on that. During his imprisonment for that, they got him to confess to the murders of Dylan Round. And in an exchange, in a plea deal, in exchange for a plea, he agreed to lead them to Dylan Round's body. So he has led them to the body. Well, this past week, he was sentenced under that plea agreement. And he pled guilty to second-degree murder and 2 counts of possession of a firearm. So on the second-degree murder, he was sentenced to anywhere from 1 to 15 years. Now, this is a state where the Department of Corrections gets to decide how much of that sentence they will serve. But then consecutive to that are the 2 firearm sentences, both 1 to 15 years. So he's going to be serving anywhere from 3 to 30 years. Because the first sentence is concurrent with the other 2 sentences, which are consecutive. So 1 to 15 years, followed by 1 to 15 years. So anywhere from 2 to 3 to 15, 30, I don't know. Anyway, the judge said he was going to recommend to the corrections department that they leave him in there as long as possible. Okay. So next case we wanted to get to was Tracy Ferriter. I don't know if you remember her husband, Timothy Ferriter. This is a couple who moved down from, where did they move from? Arizona. They moved from Arizona down to South Florida and were keeping their young son in an 8-by-8-foot box that he had a contractor build into his garage. And this is where he kept this young man. So the judge had separated their trials because I don't know why he separated them. But so she needed time to get her own lawyer because before they were being represented by the same lawyer, and there was probably some kind of conflict and, what have you. So we sat through and I did recap the trial of Timothy Ferriter. He was sentenced, he was found guilty on aggravated child abuse, child neglect, and false imprisonment. So he is serving a 10-year sentence followed by 5 years of probation. Or is it a 5-year sentence? 5 year? I think it's 5 and 5. He's serving a 5-year sentence followed by 5 years of probation. So she appeared before a judge last week on same charges. And she pled guilty to 1 count of aggravated child abuse, 1 count of child neglect, and 1 count of false imprisonment in exchange for 10 years probation. 10 years of probation. She has to have a mental health evaluation and she has to do 300 hours of community service, and she can do that in Ohio. Apparently she wants to move to Ohio. Who doesn't want to get out of South Florida? So he's going to allow her to do that sentence, carry out that sentence in Ohio. And my understanding is the first several months of this probation will be house arrest. So she has to serve a certain period of time. I don't know if it's 9 months or I'm not familiar with that law. Even though I lived in Florida, I didn't do criminal law. So she has to serve part of that on house arrest. Look, a new cup. Isn't that beautiful? I have no idea who gave this to me. It just appeared on my desk one day while I was at the retreat. So whoever, if you're out there and you gave this to me, thank you very much. I really like it. Drinking my coffee. So the next case that I'm going to talk to you about is the Karen Reed case. Now, I did not cover this case. This case went on for 9 weeks. Karen Reed was charged with the murder of her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, who happened to be a 16-year veteran with the Boston Police Department. And she, 44 years old, she had been in this 2-year relationship with John O'Keefe, and she is claiming that she was framed. She's being framed by the Boston Police Department. So I said, let me look into the facts of this thing, because, So Karen, she's an equity analyst at Fidelity Investments. They meet, they're together for 2 years. She says, we had arguments here and there, but we were getting along fine. So they go out drinking one night. And they're drinking with other officers and, the police that they know. And everybody's going to go to this after party at Sergeant Albert's house. Sergeant Albert is now retired, but at the time, the sergeant with the Boston Police Department. So they go over to Sergeant Albert's house, and she drops her boyfriend off. She drops John off, and she goes home. So when he doesn't show up the next day, he never comes home. So she calls up her friends, and she's going to go look for him. And she looks for him at Albert's house, Sergeant Albert's house. And lo and behold, there is John O'Keefe's body on the lawn. She calls 911. They don't declare that he's dead until he gets to the hospital. He died of blunt force trauma to the head and hypothermia. Because this was in January 29th of 2022. It gets pretty cold in Boston. So the prosecution's theory of the case is that when she dropped him off at Sergeant Albert's house, she backed over him. She took her Lexus SUV and she drove over him and then went home, left him there to die. Now, the defense's theory of the case is that she dropped him off. Apparently, Sergeant Albert had a German Shepherd, and the German Shepherd attacked him and left him on the lawn. And when everybody was leaving the house that night, everybody just walked right past John O'Keefe, and nobody called the police. Okay, but during this 9 weeks of presentation of evidence, they presented evidence that, they can pull. We know this from the Murdaugh case. They can pull the vehicle data, and the vehicle data, if you get it into the right computer program, can show you a lot. And what it showed the prosecution was that during the time frame, the relevant time frame, her vehicle, her Lexus SUV, backed up 60 feet at 24 miles an hour at that location. And that one of her taillights was broken, and that there were pieces of a drink glass, in the bumper of the vehicle. Yeah. So, what happened to this guy? So, that's what the jury said, too. We don't know. Hung jury. They wrote the judge a note. Listen to this note. She's going to read the note. Listen to this.
Continue to find ourselves at an impasse. Our perspectives on the evidence are starkly divided. Some members of the jury firmly believe that the evidence surpasses the burden of proof, establishing the elements of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Conversely, others find the evidence fails to meet this standard and does not sufficiently establish the necessary elements of the charges. The deep division is not due to a lack of effort or diligence, but rather a sincere adherence to our individual principles and moral convictions. To continue to deliberate would be futile and only serve to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. I'm not going to do that to you folks. Your service is complete. I'm declaring a mistrial in this case. I'll be in to see you privately in a few minutes. So thank you so much for your service.
hung jury. So are they going to retry her? I don't know. Yeah. All right. Now, the last case I want to update you on is David Swift. Now, you guys got to remember David Swift, because I kept saying no relationship to Taylor, our girl Taylor. David Swift had been charged for the 2011 murder of his wife. First degree premeditated murder, and all of these lesser included offenses were not named on the indictment. The lesser included offenses. He was just indicted for first degree premeditated murder. He was not indicted until 2022. 11 years later, they indict him. He's left the state. He's gotten remarried. He's raised his 2 kids. They're in college. And his second wife in 2022, she divorces him. So the only asset he has is the house that they had together, and they have to split the equity in that. And he's trying to save that money so they can go to college. So anyway, he's tried for first degree premeditated murder of his wife. And the reason you'll probably remember this case is because there was no evidence against him. She had gone to this swingers party. She kept hanging out with these swingers. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not judging. Hey, you do you, honey. But he didn't like it. And she was hanging out with these swingers, and she comes home early because her daughter had been over at a sleepover and said, Mom, I want to go home. So she goes and gets her daughter, and she comes home, goes to bed. And the next morning, everybody gets up in the house, David and the 2 girls. She's not there. She's not found for several months. Her body is later found at a cemetery, and he's tried for first degree premeditated murder. Now, during the charging conference, the judge decides, and he's allowed to do this, to put lesser included offenses on the jury form. He puts first degree murder, second degree murder, attempted first degree murder, and attempted second degree murder, and then manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter. Now, first degree premeditated murder, you obviously have to find premeditation. Second degree murder, you have to find a willful. It doesn't have to be premeditated, but it's willful, in other words. So the jury deliberated, and they came back not guilty on first degree premeditated murder, not guilty on attempted first degree premeditated murder, not guilty on second degree murder, and not guilty on attempted second degree murder. And then they were hung on the manslaughter. Hung jury. So why are we in court now? Well, they were in court to discuss a motion to dismiss that the defense had filed, because what they're arguing now is that he cannot be retried. When the prosecution indicted him the first time, they only indicted him on first degree premeditated murder. All of those lesser included offenses were included by the judge on the jury verdict form. The prosecution did not allege it. So what they had to do was go back and get another indictment. So they go back to the grand jury, they get another indictment for voluntary manslaughter. Now they want to try him for voluntary manslaughter. They can't try him on the other stuff. He's already been tried. It would be double jeopardy to try him again on first degree premeditated murder and second degree murder. But they want to try him for voluntary manslaughter. Well, the defense gets up and says, statute of limitations has run. You can't do it. You could have alleged it when you alleged first degree murder, and you didn't do it. Well, their argument, the prosecution's argument, is it's the same fact or circumstances. It's not a surprise to him. He's got plenty of time to get ready for trial. And it's not beyond the statute of limitations, because their argument is once you move out of the state, that tolls the statute of limitations. And he did before the statute of limitations ran. There's only a 4-year statute of limitations on this manslaughter charge. And like I said, this was back in 2011. So before that 4 years, he moved out of the state. So they're saying that told the statute of limitations. So there's no there's no issue, Judge. We can try him on that. Well, the judge was like, not so fast. And there was actually 2 indictments they were arguing. The first one was for aggravated assault. The second one was for the voluntary manslaughter. Well, the aggravated assault, the judge says no. Statute of limitations is right on that. That's dismissed. You're not going to be tried on that. But he wants to think about the arguments that were put forth on whether the statute of limitations has run on this voluntary manslaughter charge. Now, the defense is saying this case is over. Once the jury came back and said not guilty on the first degree premeditated murder, the case is over. Double jeopardy. You can't try him again because the prosecution never alleged voluntary manslaughter. Even if the jury, he said, had come back on that voluntary manslaughter that the judge added in there on the verdict form, if they had come back, he would have moved to dismiss that verdict, set aside that verdict, because that was never alleged by the prosecution. Does any of that make sense? If it doesn't, ask me a question in the comments. I'll be happy to explain it because it's complicated. But bottom line is the judge is going to review it. They're going to have another hearing on July 30th, I believe, where I think the judge is going to come back and render his decision on this voluntary manslaughter charge. The evidence was so weak in this case. I mean, so weak. Every bit circumstantial, no direct evidence that he did anything to his wife. Now, I'm not saying he didn't do it. Maybe he did. I don't know. But there was no evidence at that trial. And nothing to give the jury, beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it. No. So is the case over? Is he going to be retried for manslaughter? I don't know. We'll see. So those are the updates that I have for you. I'm so happy to be back. And on Monday, I don't know if the jury selection will be Monday, but July 9th, that is when we're going to do the Rust trial with Alec Baldwin. And the big question in that case is he going to take the stand? My bet is yes, he's going to take the stand. Let me know in the comments what you think, because he's an actor. And then is the jury going to believe what he says because he's an actor? Are they going to believe him? Apparently, he said in an interview many, many years ago that the gun he didn't fire the gun. It went off accidentally. He didn't fire the gun. He didn't pull the trigger. They going to believe him? I think his fault runs way deeper than whether he pulled the trigger or not, because this was his production. Yeah. So more to come on that on Monday. So I will see you then. Have a great Wednesday. I'm going to be live tonight. We're going to talk about what's next on the channel and what I'll be doing during my Craft With Me Wednesdays on Wednesday nights for the next month or so. So I'll see you then tonight at 7. Take care, everybody. Bye.